What if you had to live on just $20,000 a year? That's less than $1,700 a month after taxes. And believe it or not, millions of people in the US live on even less. I decided to challenge myself to live like I made only $20,000 a year. And today, I'll share what I learned. Spoiler: it wasn't just about cutting costs, it was about changing how I see money and freedom. This experiment taught me more about money, happiness, and my own habits than I expected. Setting the rules before starting, I needed to set clear rules. First, there would be no cheating. If it wasn't in my budget, I wouldn't buy it. Second, I had to pay for all essentials: rent, utilities, groceries, transport, etc. And third, I needed to track every single dollar spent to avoid blowing my budget. It might sound simple, but I knew this would be a real test of discipline. Breaking down the numbers. First, let's break down the math. $20,000 a year comes to about $1,667 a month. Considering rent, food, transportation, healthcare, it doesn't go far. I wanted to see, could I survive, and what would I learn about money, mindset, and priorities? So I set a strict budget, tracked every dollar, and lived within those limits for 30 days. Here's what hit me fast. Housing eats everything. Even with roommates or a studio apartment, rent is the biggest weight. Every dollar had to be questioned. Eating out, random Amazon buys, or even grabbing a coffee became a serious decision. The emotional side was tough. It wasn't just math. It was stress, mental exhaustion, and constantly saying no. This experience made me realize that people living on this income aren't just fighting numbers, they're fighting decision fatigue every single day. Every spending decision has a direct impact on my success and my survival within this budget. Week 1, reality hits. The first week was a shock to my system, but here's the surprise. It wasn't all bad. Living on $20,000 taught me gratitude for the little things. A home-cooked meal felt like luxury. Simplicity has power. Without endless spending options, you get creative and resourceful. Community matters. Sharing resources, splitting costs, or swapping favors became more valuable than money. I also realized how easy it is for people outside this income bracket to judge. Until you live it, you don't understand the hidden costs of poverty, like stress, limited choices, and lack of safety nets. Unexpected lessons about spending. Something shifted during that first week. I began appreciating small things more. A cup of coffee at home wasn't just caffeine. It felt like a win. A home-cooked meal felt satisfying in a way takeout never had. I started to see how much money I had been wasting on things that brought little to no improvement in my life. This experiment forced me to value every dollar, and in doing so, I valued the things I already had more deeply. Living on $20,000 changes your spending habits, but more importantly, it changes your perspective. Here's what anyone can take away from this challenge. Even if you don't live on $20,000, track every dollar. Awareness is more powerful than you think. Differentiate needs versus wants. Really ask yourself before each purchase. Build a financial cushion, no matter how small. Even $10 a week matters. Appreciate the freedom money buys, not just the stuff it buys. Most importantly, empathy. People living on $20,000 aren't bad with money. They're navigating a system stacked against them. And yet, there's resilience and creativity in that struggle that's worth learning from. Week 2, creativity kicks in. By week 2, I started finding creative ways to stretch my budget. Instead of paying for a gym membership, I worked out in the park. Instead of new clothes, I bought at thrift stores or swapped with friends. I began searching for free events around the city. I found concerts, art shows, and community gatherings that cost nothing, but still gave me social connection and entertainment. When you cannot spend freely, you rely on time, effort, and creativity. It became almost like a game. How could I enjoy life without opening my wallet? Week 3. The emotional wall. By the third week, the novelty wore off. I had gotten used to cooking at home, avoiding unnecessary purchases, and finding free activities. But now the emotional weight started to hit. I began to notice what I was missing out on. Friends would talk about new restaurants they tried, weekend trips they booked, or things they had bought. I wanted to join them, but I couldn't. Even small splurges like a movie ticket meant cutting something else from my budget. This was the hardest part. Not the lack of things, but the feeling of being left out. Living on $20,000 a year wasn't just about managing money, it was about managing emotions and learning to be okay with less in a world that celebrates more. Finding joy in simplicity. The emotional dip didn't last forever. I started looking for joy in things that cost nothing. A walk in the park, reading books I already owned, cooking something new from the same simple ingredients. I realized that while money gives you access to experiences, it doesn't create happiness on its own. A $50 dinner out could be exciting, but so could a $20 homemade meal with good friends. This mindset shift was important. It reminded me that while a low budget limits choices, it doesn't have to limit happiness. Week 4, Mastering the System. By the 4th week, I had turned this lifestyle into a system. I knew exactly where my money would go before I spent it. I planned meals for the week based on what was on sale. I tracked my transport costs and avoided unnecessary trips. At this point, I realized I could keep living like this longer if I had to. The habits I had built were sustainable, even though the income was low. Looking back, the biggest challenges weren't the ones I expected. It wasn't the basic necessities. I could cover those with careful planning. The real challenge was social pressure. Our culture pushes spending as a form of connection, and when you can't match that, you have to find other ways to belong. The second challenge was dealing with the unexpected. One small emergency, a medical bill, a car repair, could destroy the budget instantly. That constant sense of fragility was stressful and made me think about how many people live with that pressure every day. Lessons I'll carry forward. When the 30 days ended, I didn't immediately go back to my old habits. This challenge taught me several valuable lessons. First, most of my previous spending was on things I didn't actually need or truly enjoy. Second, creativity and resourcefulness can replace money more often than I realized. Whether it's finding free entertainment or repurposing something I already own, there are always options. Third, tracking every dollar is powerful. Knowing exactly where your money goes makes you think before spending, and that alone can save a surprising amount. Living like I made $20,000 a year was eye-opening. It showed me how little I truly need to be content, and how much of our spending is about habit and social influence rather than actual necessity. It wasn't easy. There were moments of frustration, boredom, and even envy. But there were also moments of pride, satisfaction, and clarity. If I ever faced a situation where my income dropped significantly, I now know I could adapt. More importantly, I know that a fulfilling life doesn't have to come with a high price tag. Sometimes less really can be more. If you're curious about your own spending habits, try giving yourself a smaller budget for a week or even just a few days. You might be surprised by what you learn about money and about yourself. Here's the takeaway. Living on $20,000 a year taught me discipline, gratitude, and empathy. But it also showed me why financial education and mindset shifts are so critical. If you want to learn how to build smarter money habits, create breathing room in your budget, and grow your wealth, subscribe to WealthWise Mindset. Thanks for watching. Together, we're building financial freedom and abundance, one mindset shift at a time. See you in the next one.